Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at Tamiya's 1/32 scale F16-CJ. As you can see, an absolutely enormous kit. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So I personally opted to start off in the cockpit for this kit, as it seemed like there was going to be quite a lot of detail that needed to be sorted out. This follows a very similar construction to the 1/48 scale. That means that you've got your control panels which kind of slot in here. You can see that I'm using masking tape just to hold them in place. This will all become clear in a very short amount of time. But my first bit of painting for this build is going to be using Ammo's matte black just to paint in the control panels. For the entirety of this build, when it comes to main colours, I'm going to be using Ammo MIG paints with the exception of one or two metallic paints. So once I'm happy with the matte black coat, I can then actually pop the control panels back off. The reason for this is because I used the masking tape and I didn't cement them down. This means that no parts were damaged and they don't have any of that residual glue on them. So now that they've been taken off, I can then spend a bit of time masking off all the black elements that need to be kept black in the cockpit. Once they have all been masked off and I'm happy, I can then put them back onto the model, still not cementing them on, and then I can come in with the grey colour. For the grey, I believe I'm using a light compass grey, and you can see that I'm only really dusting the paint on. I'm doing this because I don't want to flood the cockpit, and if I flooded it, it would lead to a paint ridge, which would then just be an absolute pain to sort out. Here you can see the masking tape did do its job, and it kept all the black elements black, which gave me a brilliant base to do some detail painting of all the fantastically modelled knobs, dials, gauges, etc. So the first thing that I like to do is to base all of the dials and knobs and gauges in a white. This just gives a really good base to any of the future colours like the reds and the yellows, which will go on top of them. So once that was all done, it looked like this, and be careful not to drop it. This is not advised, do not do that. But once that is all dried, I can then come over the top and pick out one or two or a couple of the gauges with the red and one or two with the yellow. This just adds some variation into the cockpit. Is it accurate? Probably not. But it feels like a waste of time to keep them so accurate when, let's be honest, on the finished model, you're not going to see too much of it. I can then put on some other elements like the throttle and the actual control stick into the cockpit. I didn't put these on just because I didn't want them to get in the way of my detail painting, and I advise that you do the same thing. So once that was all detail painted, I could move on to a slightly different sub-assembly. Here you can see me building up the rail system, I guess, or the pretty much the rail or the mounting system for the ejection seat. As you can see, my technical knowledge really isn't too good. So if you know the exact name of this thing, please do tell me, I'd love to know. But once that is all painted and also assembled, it can then be inserted from the bottom of the cockpit tub. It then slots into place, and then you can push it back, and there's quite a satisfying click into place. Interesting bit of engineering here. Never seen it before, but wouldn't mind doing it again. So then you can make up the rudder pedals, however do not cement them. As you can see, they are now no longer there in that clip, but yeah, don't cement them because in the future you're going to have to put a screw through there, and if the rudder pedal's in place, you're either going to have to break them or you're not going to have the screw in there, so just be careful there. We can then move on to the actual ejection seat. This builds up really nicely, quite simple, not too many pieces, which I personally prefer. I feel like sometimes when there's too many pieces on the ejection seats, it just means that you sometimes sink a little bit too much time into the ejection seat because there's just so much to detail on it. But anyway, once that was built up, I then gloss coated the cockpit tub, and then I could do a bit of weathering on it. I didn't want to do a huge amount of weathering, and this weathering is more just to distinguish in between the panels. So as you can see, I've used a light grey wash to really separate up all of those panels. It just gives another dimension to it. And these are the cockpit, the side walls of the cockpit tub, and I've just put like a very dark grey or a kind of dark navyish blue into the recesses to give this kind of fake shadow sort of touch. You're not really going to see this in the finished model, but I thought I'd rather do that there than you know, get caught out. So that was pretty much the cockpit all sorted. I did then actually have time to paint up the ejection seat. This was painted in the exact same way as a cockpit, really wasn't that interesting, but I did then use this dark wash from Ammo to give it a bit of a grimy effect. So for a change, I know this is a very rare occurrence, but I'm actually going to put a figure into one of my models. If you've watched the channel for a while, you know that I don't usually do figures, as it's just something which I'm not very comfortable with doing, but I thought, you know what, let's just try it. So I watched a video from a YouTuber called Night Shift. I'm sure many of you have heard of him. He does a lot of armor and quite a lot of dioramas. And this was pretty much the method that he recommended to painting some figures. So what I initially did was black primer, then from the top I sprayed down some, I think it was just a satin white, to give these kind of false shadows and false highlights. And then you pretty much just paint over almost like usual, but with a very, very thin down paints. So almost it is more of a glaze than anything else. And then you can just come in over the top and pick out all of the details. So here you can see me doing his little I don't know what they are, but his little patches and stuff on his torso. And then of course like the buckles and the belts and stuff. So it was quite a simple method actually. It was definitely a change to what I'm used to. I don't think it went horribly wrong. Generally for the painting, I just used a variety of greens and khakis, and once everything was detail painted, I actually dry brushed him to kind of reaffirm a couple of these highlighted areas. And I was really quite happy with how he was looking at this stage. So with the final sort of things was going to be sort of, I guess this is his oxygen tube. I don't think that's very, very technical, but I think you get the gist. And I did his visor in a brass goldy colour, as I've recently gone to the Royal International Air Tattoo, and looking through some of my photos, I saw the vast majority of the pilots had these really cool sort of reflective visors on, which were all these nice reds and orange, so I thought I'd try and replicate that here. The final step was to give him a wash to bring out some of these darker areas and the darker recesses. And with that, we're going to name him Derek. Derek was finished, and Derek was ready to now be put into his ejection seat and then put into the model. So I hope you enjoyed my first attempt at doing some figure painting. If you think I should do more figure painting, do let me know down below. If you think that it was absolutely horrid, do let me know down below. But yeah, so he went then onto this rail system. It wasn't incredible. It did need a little bit of fiddling around to get in. But once he was in, he did look very, very happy and at home. So with the cockpit all completed, I could now move on to the engine. The engine that Tamiya offer is superbly detailed, and if you were going to opt to have it displayed outside of the model on the included engine trolley, it would look absolutely superb, but that's more for a diorama purpose in my opinion. As I wasn't going to do a diorama, I thought I would focus my attention more on the interior of the exhaust, which is what is going to be able to be seen. So to do this, I pretty much just used a very, very dark pin wash. This was using burnt umber, I believe that is the colour that I was using, and then it was just kind of brushed on so that it would fall into the recessed details, and then I would come in with a clean brush with some white spirit and then clean it up. It was quite a simple method, however I was really quite happy with the results here. It didn't take too long either, just because, you know, the detail that Tamiya provides is very pronounced, which is a good thing in this case. It means that I know where I'm meant to be, you know, cleaning up. As you can see, not too shabby. For the other ones, which were currently clean, all I did was kind of dry brush some oil, and then, you know, just really lightly kind of stipple it and brush it on there to give this sort of faded and, you know, jetty exhaust looking result. Yeah, I thought it was quite effective for how long it took. So I could now move away from oils and move on to the after portion of the exhaust. Pretty much to do this, all I was using was Tamiya's weathering master pad thingamabobby. If you don't know what I'm on about, here's a photo of it. So all I did was pretty much brush it on to highlight kind of some of the raised details, and then I came in again and concentrated it in a couple of areas. I believe this is just where grime builds up more on the F16 exhaust, but I'm not too sure. So once I was happy with all the oil and the weathering, it was then all kind of sealed in with VMS's matte varnish. I've used that quite a lot. It's my go-to matte varnish. I can then move on to putting a couple of the other elements into the engine and the exhaust build up. These are just a couple of turbines and a couple of other, you know, thingies and stuff like that. Then I can cement the two fuselage half together. There are two very prominent ridges where the the exhaust turbines can fit into, so you're not going to have any trouble with, you know, alignment here. It's just your basic Tamiya engineering. You know, they've thought about it all through before they've done it, so you know you're in safe hands when you've got a Tamiya kit. A couple of other panels can then be cemented onto it, and then that was pretty much my engine all complete. This is the, I don't know the technical name for it, however it's at the back of the actual fuselage, and it's where your exhaust kind of comes out of. This was one of the only areas where I actually had to use a little bit of VMS super glue to get rid of seam. So just keep that in mind, that you do have a little bit of sanding work even though it is a Tamiya kit. Moving on to the gear bay, it's very similar to the 1/48 scale version, where they just have these structural looking brace parts which will go into corresponding location pins. It's really nicely done. You know, I had a real fun time building this gear bay up, as there is, I don't think they've overdone the detail here. I think there's probably room for a couple more you know, detail aspects, especially when you have people like Kinetic, who do offer a very detailed version of it. Not in 1/32 scale, but still, maybe a little bit of room for improvement. I then primed the entire thing in black, and then I pretty much just black based the thing on. So what I would do is highlight the inside of the panels and then dust on white around the rest of it. This just kind of gives these full sort of shadows and a bit of dimension to it, which is kind of what I was going for. So the gear bay part is also part of the intake part, so that can then be cemented on top, and as you saw, there was a big seam. On 1/48 scale you can kind of get away from it as it is quite small, however on 1/32 scale there was no chance in hell that I was going to get away with having a seam like that. So I whipped out VMS's super glue and then spent the best part of about 5 hours sanding them back. Looking back on it, it might have been a bad idea, however hopefully you'll see in the final shots that it was worth it, as you won't be able to hopefully see any seams in the air intakes. If you do, let me know. But 5 hours later, here were the results. I was quite happy with it. Was it perfect? No, but was it better? 100%. So you can see me building up the sort of back portion of the F16. Tamiya allow you to have the kind of back aspect of it all opened up, so this, you could go to ham detail in the inside of this. However, I didn't, as we know, because we're keeping it quite a basic build. Not a basic, well, you get what I mean. We're not going to go for all of the options here because I want to keep the flow of the aircraft correct. You know, I don't want to have panels missing all over the place. But yeah. So the gear bay then can be friction fitted into this, a very, very tight fit, and then that can then be not cemented actually, it can be screwed into the lower half of the fuselage. So Tamiya have done a really good job of implementing quite a lot of screws and stuff into the build, and it just gives the modeler, in my opinion, a little bit of ease of mind, because when you're working with such big models as the F16 and 1/32 scale, it's not incredibly huge, but you know, it's a hefty model. There's a lot of weight involved, and you know, sometimes you don't think cement is going to be able to hold it. So the implementation of metallic elements is always appreciated on 1/32 scale. So on screen you can see me building up the front nose wheel. As you can see, there is the metal landing gear leg, which, you know, it's got some nice details on it. However, there was almost a mould line on it, which I tried to scrape off, but it just didn't seem to go, which was a little bit annoying, but you know, I don't think you can really see it unless you squint your eyes. This then just kind of slots into this upper sort of nose wheel bay, and then it can then be once again screwed into the air intake. This front splitter is then inserted from the top into it, much like the 1/48 scale version, and then that can go into its almost, I don't really know how to say this bit, but I guess it's its casing, I guess. This wasn't a brilliant fit, as you can see. Look, you know, it wasn't brilliant. I did have to get out the VMS super glue here, just to get rid of the seam, quite a substantial seam as well on the underside, so do be aware of that. I don't think it was anything that I did, but you know, maybe I just got unlucky. This can then be you know, slotted into the underside part of the fuselage, just like the gear bay and the other pieces, and that is really starting to be, you know, have this underside all built up. We're putting on some of these aerodynamic sort of fin looking things here as well. Very iconic feature of the F16 if you ask me. Along with this kind of casing or holder for the arrestor hook, I believe. Yeah, here it is now. Once again, I would not put this on until the very end, just because I broke this off and I didn't manage to mend it. So maybe leave that until the end, because it is very easy to put it on the end. Another good thing that Tamiya do is give you the, you know, required nose weight as a sort of molded piece, so you don't have to worry about trying to shove marbles or pennies or anything in there to get your nose weight all sorted, as it is a molded feature. Once that is first put into place, you can then put in your cockpit, and as you can see, that's why you remove your rudder pedals, because that's where that screw goes. Once your screw is in place, you can then put the rudder pedals back in. So, you know, good little bit of engineering there. However, probably could be a bit more clear in the instructions. So here I am now, just building up the gun bay. Once again, Tamiya offers a very nicely detailed gun bay. However, I'm not unfortunately going to be displaying it. Moving on to some detailing on the top half of the fuselage, specifically the sort of cockpit. I'm just doing a little bit of chipping. I'm using this greeny yellow colour, which I believe is zinc chromate primer, which they use, or something along those sort of lines, as it just adds another element to it. And then I did weather up the back portion using some white and grey oil paints. This can then be you know, connected to the other section of the upper half of the fuselage. It's very, very similar to the 1/40 upscale version. I know I keep saying it, but it really is very, very similar. This is then secured with a screw. However, do keep in mind that this screwdriver is a little bit too small for that screw, so have a set of different screwdriver heads handy. This front bit can then be also cemented on. Do keep in mind that this is related to the version of the aircraft that you are doing, so if you're doing a certain version, you might not have all of those little antennas and stuff on the front of it. Here you can see that I put a large poly cap into a piece and then put it into another piece, which is pretty much just for the flaperons. Is it flaperons? Maybe it's just flaps actually. I apologise, I think it's just flaps. And then with that all sorted, we can now make the two halves of the fuselage together. That's the upper and the lower half. It definitely took a little bit of time to align them, but once they were all aligned, it went together very nicely. There were no seams that had to be cleaned up, so I was a very happy boy. I could now mate the lower halves of the wings. As you can see, there are also indentations there for the pylons to be connected to. As I'm doing the Viper demo team, that means that I wanted them blanked off. Tamiya do supply parts to blank them off in the kit, however it is not stated in the instructions. So do have a little look around on the sprues if you do want to blank them off, because they are there. I then fitted this part, which is for the vertical stabilizer. It's very important to get this piece correct and follow the instructions, otherwise you won't be able to have it removable. And having a removable tail is really helpful for transportation of this thing, because as I said, it is huge. So with that all sorted, I could then move on to sorting out the slats at the front of the wing. These, you know, you have to choose whether you're going to have them in the lowered position or the upright position. I personally wanted to have them lowered, so this means I would have to snip off these two pieces here. This does, however, leave, unfortunately, quite a annoying bit of, you know, kind of clean up. However, if you have a Dremel and one of these little ball adaptation pieces, it can be cleaned up in a matter of seconds, and it just means a much cleaner fit. So, you know, simple little fixer. It was also quite satisfying to see it all get kind of obliterated. I do like a good Dremel, always a bit of fun. But yeah, so with that all sorted, it could then be moved on to doing the outer ailerons for the model. So these small pieces have to be connected onto it, and I believe they're for the anti-static sort of poles, not poles, but these things here. These are included in the kit, which I thought was a really nice addition, as usually you'd have to pay extra for some aftermarket kit to do all of that sort of stuff. Moving on now to the canopy. In preparation to getting it masked, I thought it would be a good time to now sort out any seams that there may be. As it is Tamiya, that usually means that their clear part's going to have some seams on them. So to sort them out, I initially scraped away the main amount of plastic from the top of it, being very, very careful using, I think it was a new scalpel blade, hopefully I used one. If I didn't, make sure you use one. And then I pretty much use, you know, starting from about 1,000 grit all the way up to about, you know, 3,000 grit sandpaper to get rid of the vast majority of scratches, and then I'll use a little bit of Tamiya polishing compound to get rid of the majority of everything and make everything look a little bit better. I'm really not very good at this, so if you want a better tutorial on how to do it, do look on the internet, because I don't think I'm the master of it, but I am slowly getting better. I then use the kit supplied masks with an addition of also some masking fluid to mask off the main amount of the canopy. I did then attach the slats on, as I'm now starting to bring everything onto the model in preparation to prime it. So here you can see me putting the flaps on as they slot into the polycap, and then I will go and put in the, you know, the outer ailerons. And, you know, it is always good to put all these pieces on and prime everything at the same time, just to always keep continuity of your paint job. So the last thing to really put on before I could prime was the vertical stabilizer. These use quite a few polycaps as well, and it's quite a nice build up here. You know, they don't over engineer it, but they don't under engineer it as well, so you still do get quite a nice amount of, you know, movable details and nice details. So of course, you know, this the rudder can be moved because there's a polycap there. I don't think I'd personally want to like play around with this model and have it movable, but I think the reason for Tamiya doing this is so that if you're doing a diorama and you want to have it in a very specific, you know type of move I don't think move is the right word, but I hope you get what I mean, you can then do that. With the use of the polycaps, you can now see that it kind of just slides on there with no cement needed and still a really nice tight fit. So another thing that had to be done, very similar to the ailerons, was the elevators. These also have the, you know, the anti-static on the edge, but as you can see, it's quite hard to get these things on there because you know, they ping off quite easily. So I'm very lucky that I didn't lose any, but just take your time. Maybe don't hold them as tightly as I did. So as you can see, I'm using some VMS super glue to hold these anti-static poles in there, and then they can, once again, using polycaps, just be friction fitted on there. So I thought it was a good time to do the exhaust, as the F16 exhaust, it's not the most complex exhaust, but it does require a fair bit of masking. So it uses almost a jig. Tamiya have opted to use a jig sort of method for this. So you have, I think it's 10 pieces or something. No, not 10, but anyway, a certain amount of pieces which they're, you know, go around in this cylindrical fashion. It's quite well done. However, there are, you know, a couple of gaps around the outside, so I just made sure to try and make them as equal as I could. It wasn't perfect, I don't think, but it will do the job. So using these two colours, it was AK's aluminium and also Ammo's gunmetal, I'm going to be doing the variation. So the F16 exhaust has a kind of aluminium on the outside, and then these slats almost on the inside are much darker metal. So I initially gave it a coat of the AK's aluminium, the real colour, not real colour, I think it's real metal, I don't know, but anyway, AK's aluminium as a base, then I masked it off, and then I'm just going to go over the top using the Ammo Mix gunmetal. I think I also put 1 or 2 drops of black in there just to really darken it up. This is far better than my initial time doing the F16 exhaust. If you watched my previous video on that, the aggressor one, you'll know that the exhaust wasn't brilliant. I have been notified by that by some people, but I thought it was a much better attempt. Tamiya also offer a very nicely detailed 6-barrel Gatling gun that the F16 has. I personally didn't, you know, paint it up or anything because of course I'm not going to be having any of the panels open. However, there's definitely a nice potential there to create a really nice looking gun if you went ham on the weathering and all of the nice different metallic colours. But this slots in with relative ease, definitely a little bit of fiddling around, and then you can put this panel on top just to secure everything in. So the nose cone, you also have the option to do a really nicely detailed radar. However, once again, and you can have it open and closed at your discretion. However, once again, I'm not ever going to have it open because it's never going to be in a diorama or anything, so I left it off. I know it's probably a little bit annoying, and I'm probably not making the full benefit of all of the detail that the kit has. However, that's just how I plan to do this build from the very beginning. So the entire model was then primed, and this is what we are going to do with this model, the F16 American Viper demo team. So model maker do these lovely decals and also mask set for them. However, my god, did I underestimate this. If you have me on Instagram, which I'm sure a couple of you do, you know that I spent well over a week just masking off the underside and also the top. The thing that took the longest was trying to retain some sort of uniformity between in the gaps between the different panels, and just trying to make sure that it doesn't look horrendous. The outer wing tips have so many different panels on them. It is, you know, it is just an absolute brain fart, you know, like you feel everything. Your back hurts, your brain hurts, you know. It's just wasn't the most enjoyable time I had doing this. I think if you are going to attempt this, I would highly recommend getting on a series which you really enjoy, or maybe a podcast which you really like. I personally put on Growling Sidewinder for quite a lot of it. You might have heard of him. He's a DCS player, does all these, you know, wacky dogfights and stuff like a P-51 versus an F-22 Raptor. So, you know, that was something to pass the time. However, it was still an incredibly tedious task, to say the least. The general fit of the mask was quite good. However, the exception of one or two which did have to be snipped in one or two places. Coming up, I do have a slight insight into how I was feeling during this, so let's just tune in to see how I was feeling. Right.
Oh, fuck.
So, as you can see, emotions were running high. However, we did get there in the end, and this is how it was looking. So, I now had the task of hopefully not doing anything stupid when spraying it. So, I went to something which I knew very, very well, which was Ammo Mix colours, and I'm using medium gunship grey for the general grey on this aircraft. It's this it's almost the webbing which continues around, and it's always medium sea grey, which is it's a really cool design, but it's just an absolute pain to mask off. I was also really, really careful when spraying this on not to flood the model, as any paint ridges would be so visible on this. So dusting the model with the paint was the right way to go, in my opinion. Some of these masks did, as you can see, they kind of peel up, so I would rather have them peel up than be stuck to the model and rip up loads of paint. That being said, I did have one or two accidents where quite a large chunk of the paint was ripped off. But anyway, this was where I started to peel them off, and once again, let's tune in to hear my excitement. So as you can hear, I was incredibly happy that, you know, it had worked and there wasn't any huge amount of leakage. Oh, look, there you go, little happy thrill. And there you go. So once they were all peeled off, you can see definitely a couple of little paint rippages up. However, on the whole, I was, you know, very, very happy with how it was looking. When it had been ripped up and stuff, it was just really, really simple to mask them off and just repaint them up. I then went on to masking off the tail. The tail is very, very intricate, as it has this, you know, brilliant sort of depiction of the F-16 doing a barrel roll almost. So that took a little while. It wasn't horrendous, but you know, by then I spent so long doing masking that I'd given up even trying to comprehend what I was doing. That's probably my favourite shot of taking the mask off, because it just reveals this brilliant looking piece of artwork. So that was done on both sides, and it looks really good. So I could then move on to the underside. It is given a base of light compass grey, once again using a 0.3mm needle, spraying at around about 25 to 30 psi. I can't remember exactly what I was going with here, but it was in that range. Before I always spray, I always have a little piece of paper around where I'll spray onto just to see how I'm feeling with it. It's a paint flow okay, and I do recommend you do that. Once the masks had all been put down, I then masked it off. This once again was about 2 or 3 days of work. Then I peeled them all off, and we were done pretty much with the masking. Thank the Lords. I was incredibly happy to see that that was all finished, and I was also happy with the results, so it was all worth it in the end. Then moving on to a couple of the sort of final aspects for the model, as the vast majority of the work had now been done. This included the metal gear legs, a couple of the other, you know, struts and stuff for the inside of the gear bay. It is definitely quite nice to build up the gear bay at this point in the build, just to give your mind a break from all of that heavy painting. So I'm never one to rush into doing all of the gear bay at one point, just because sometimes you can have overspray as well, which gets into the gear bay, and if you've got all of your lovely details in there, you're not going to want to see them get all ruined by it. So that is something that I personally would recommend you maybe try and sort out. The gear bay doors are then also stuck onto it, and as I had them on the model when I was masking, you know, it was a really nice sort of flow onto the gear bay, and it didn't look out of place. This front bit of the air intake was also put on. I didn't actually have that on when I was masking, purely because it didn't have a brilliant amount of places to get stuck on, so I didn't want to keep on ripping it off. I said masking was all done, but it wasn't. There was also the nose cone and also the front antennas, which had to be masked off, but this really wasn't too much of an issue. The tail can then be friction fitted back onto the model after spending a little bit of time off with all the masking and everything that was happening. It's always nice when you have these friction fits, because it does allow you this sort of, you know, you're allowed to take it on and take it off whenever you really want. So if you want to do some detail work on a certain piece at a point, you don't have to worry about, oh, I've already got it cemented on there. Tamiya also provide with some nice rubber tyres which slide on nicely. It meant I didn't have to worry about any more masking of them. And with all of those pieces onto the model, I could then give it a gloss varnish, VMS's gloss varnish, before putting the decals on. These decals from Model Maker were, on the whole, very good, but very thin, you know, like incredibly thin, and they would stick to absolutely everything. So I had a case of sometimes them folding over onto each other and then making it incredibly hard to get them off, kind of unfold them. But on the whole, I thought they went down quite nicely. Didn't have too many rippages or anything like that. But you know, tell me what you think. Can you see any silvering on any of the photos? Because it's always hard for me to figure out if it's anywhere, you know, when it's your own model, you kind of look over it. But when all the decals were on, I gave the entire model VMS's satin varnish to give it a slightly matte but not too matte finish. I could then stick on the front pitot tube, which is actually metal, which is a very nice addition from Tamiya. Moving on now, we can go back into the cockpit, build up this front control panel. I'm not too sure why Tamiya asked you to do this at the very end and not at the very beginning, but you know, you don't question, you just do. So that was all weathered up, nicely weathered and put into the cockpit. I could then take the masks off, which did a really good job of keeping most of the paint off. The only exception was there was a little bit of varnish which had obviously got under the canopy and into the top of it. However, that was no issue because it wasn't stuck down or anything, so I just got, you know, clean a bit of a toilet paper out and then just kind of scrubbed it away, and it made it look a little bit better. Not brilliant, but a bit better. So with the addition of 1 or 2 parts, that was this build finished. So I hope you have enjoyed this build. This has been an absolute mammoth of a project, so I apologise for not uploading. We will be going on to some slightly smaller projects now. But anyway, enjoy the final photos and the final reveal. Happy modelling, and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye bye.